Hey folks, we're here with Abby C., police accountability advocate and one of the founders of Baltimore for Border Justice, a local organization dedicated to ending police terror locally, nationally, and globally. So Abby has been fighting for the repeal of the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights for years now. Abby, would you like to give us some background on what the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights is and how it serves to protect police from scrutiny?
Sure. And, if it's all right, I want to just say first that this is an issue that has been championed and fought for by so many groups for so long, and learned about it in the last couple of years. We've included it in our advocacy priorities and tried to talk about it and talk to our representatives. But the length and intensity and expertise with which others have led this fight, like, I don't want to position myself as the person on it. But that said, it's been amongst our most important advocacy priorities this year. And the reason for that is that the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights, LEOBOR, it gives special privileges to cops in terms of how they can be investigated and disciplined that other public employees do not get, and that makes it so that again and again they don't get punished, for whatever it is that happened. And actually, one really shocking example of that is that, after George Floyd was murdered, the officer who killed him was fired. We couldn't do that here. The chief cannot just say, "Oh, you killed someone on live TV. You are off the force." There will be criminal proceedings, I'm sure, but I am the boss. I get to fire you, which is really important, whether or not the chief is immediately in that frame of mind, because you can put pressure, on one executive for whom there is accountability. And indeed, our mayors are always hiring and firing police commissioners, trying to exert pressure over the system, but they don't have any here because LEOBOR makes it so the chiefs can't summarily fire an officer, no matter what it was. It'd be suspended.
LEOBOR is specific to Maryland, but there are parallel law enforcement officers' bills of rights across the country.
That's correct. We were the first state to put one in place in 1974. It's 20-something states now, I think, but ours is still one of the most extreme. Other examples of things that it does is there's a mandatory waiting period that an officer has. I think it's 7 days before they're questioned about an incident. They're meant to be getting a lawyer during that time, but the practical effect is people get their story straight, and they have to be informed of the charges against them and who's making them, and like these details that, again, somebody else under investigation for something wouldn't necessarily get. You wouldn't like give them your whole hand. But that's how this process works. And it's just incredibly destructive to any sort of accountability or justice in cases of police misconduct.
LEOBOR also ensures that the police will be investigated by other police, not by any kind of civilian oversight.
Yes, that's right. It sets up a trial board system, and you cannot discipline an officer based on an independent investigation. When the Civilian Review Board looks over a case and recommends that an officer is fired, that doesn't mean that they're fired. And then we have specific examples of officers doing really egregious things, like the officers who shot up Keith Davis Jr. The CRB recommended that 2 of them be terminated, and they are still on the force and have been promoted.
CRB. The CRB?
Oh, sorry, the Civilian Review Board. We have an independent oversight body of police misconduct in Baltimore, but because of the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights, it can't mean anything, whatever they say, whatever they find.
So what's on the table? What's at stake in Maryland Congress today that could change how police are investigated after they kill somebody going forward?
Yeah, so the Maryland General Assembly, specifically the Judicial Proceedings Committee in the State Senate, is starting at 6 today, Monday the 15th, in a working session. They started this on Friday, debating this bill, Senate Bill 627, put forward by State Senator Jill Carter from here in Baltimore City. But this was recommended by a big work group that the General Assembly had over the fall to look at these issues. After the uprisings in May, they looked at a host of police reforms that advocates, again, have been asking for many years and making the case for and fighting for. And full repeal of LEOBOR is one of the things they recommended. The problem is, right now, what version comes out of committee. What version the full state Senate gets to vote on depends on what the Judicial Proceedings Committee puts forward. So that's what they're debating right now, is various amendments. They might take a vote tonight, they might do it later this week, but it's a time when it could get watered down to the point of meaning nothing, as has happened over and over and over again with so many issues over the years. So that is what is at stake, is are we going to have this huge necessary component of police reform or not this year?
So how might there be more opportunities for police accountability if LEOBOR is pulled in letter and in spirit?
Yeah, so the version of the bill that is being debated tonight is actually repeal and replacement. It doesn't just say that we're scrapping that and then jurisdictions, you do whatever you want from here. It lays out a process that is much more transparent, and says that hearings have to be open to the public unless there's a safety reason that they can't be, witness who has to be protected or something like that. It specifically allows for, again, a jurisdiction to choose to create an independent investigative body that oversees this process and actually can have teeth. Yeah, and it takes away these police-run trial boards that decide if there's any reaction in terms of.
So you're saying if someone who's not a cop investigates cops, they might actually look a little more closely than someone who's going to sit next to that guy in the lunchroom the next day?
Yes, that is what we need to get away from, is your coworkers being the ones to say if they think you did anything wrong or not, which is not a good system. So, for example, the Maryland Sheriff's Association and the Maryland Police Chiefs Association have been pushing for an amendment to the bill that would prohibit independent investigative oversight boards with power. So it would say, okay, we're getting rid of some of these special privileges, but you still aren't allowed to be the ones who get to say, if we were bad or not. Yeah, and then the other big bill that's being debated tonight at the same time is around a reform of the Maryland Public Information Act in relation to how records of police misconduct investigations are treated. So I don't know if this is a good time for me to get into that as well.
Absolutely. So if I sought to pull records of prior police misconduct, as I should be able to, not just as a journalist, but as a citizen, under the Maryland Public Information Act, and at the federal level, under the FOIA, Federal Freedom of Information Act, I would not get back anything of substance. Tell me about how that might change or how it might not.
Yeah, correct. So this is another bill that's one of these absolutely key top 5 priorities, along with repeal of LEOBOR, is it's called Anton's Law, after a young man who was brutalized by the police. And it's SB 178. And it would change the Maryland Public Information Act to change the classification of records of police misconduct as may never disclose, confidential, completely privileged personnel records, which is what it is now. So if you say, I have a complaint about what this officer did to me, whether it's racial profiling, harassment, getting beat up, getting shot, whatever, not only this process that LEOBOR enshrines is like internal to the police police department rather, it's a complete black box. So you can't see any sort of pattern. You can't find out why your case was decided the way it was. You know, you might get back a verdict of it was unsustained. We didn't find any wrongdoing. And you can't say, well, did you look at this thing that I gave you? Did you talk to this witness that I said was there? Did you? That's all secret. Sorry. That's the way it is now. So they're really sort of dual things that complement each other in a really important way. So again, that bill's being debated, and they're talking about amendments that would change it to the point of being almost meaningless. And primarily in this case, it's whether or not to include unsustained findings in the things that you can get access to. And it would be on a request by request basis, and things could be, you know, redacted or refused, again, if there were safety reasons, if it would compromise, you know, something important, then they can still hold them back, but they may share the records if that's not the case under this rule change. Except that this amendment would say you can't share any that were unsustained, and that's 90% of them currently. Like almost never does somebody make a complaint against a police officer and they get a finding that like, oh yeah, they should not have done that. And it's when people get back this no, your case was unsustained answer that they most need to know what happened, that they most need to have some assurance that it was a fair look at what they were saying. So yeah, really important stuff going down at the moment.
So you've been in dialogue with lawmakers about these issues for months and years. What Maryland lawmakers are supporting the repeal of LEOBOR and are supporting the expansion of how the MPIA process can be applied, and what lawmakers are opposed to it?
Yeah, so again, I am not trying to diminish myself or my work in any way, but I've spoken to multiple lawmakers, but the groups that are going really deep with this, ACLU, Civilian Policing Project, Jews United for Justice, CASA, and so many others, like I have to give them the props for having
West Coalition.
deep conversations. Yeah, absolutely, the West Coalition. This whole Maryland Coalition for Justice and Police Accountability, with 90 plus orgs around the state signed on to these demands, just giving the props where it's due. In terms of who is in support and not, it's really hard to tell in a way because people can say that they're in support, right? And then support a different version. You know, they can have committed to like, oh yeah, we're gonna repeal LEOBOR, parts of it, or replace it with something that still doesn't solve the problem. So there is a sort of list of legislators, and it's in this this amazing grassroots lobbying action toolkit Google Drive from the ACLU, and I would have to pull it up and tell you exactly who said that they're where. Most of our Baltimore City legislators have said, again, I am for these things. I think Kurt Anderson, he's a delegate, not a state senator, and it's the state Senate committee that's debating it tonight. But Anderson is on the Judiciary Committee in the House, which is going to have to do this same process. And he is not signed on. So I know that's one person who hasn't signed on to these 5 policing demands. But yeah, I will pull that up.
What arguments are being made against the increased scrutiny on police who murder people?
That it's not fair to them, that they're gonna get railroaded, basically. That poor innocent officers who didn't do anything wrong are gonna get falsely accused. You know, it's funny, it really mirrors like we can't have accountability for rape culture type arguments. Like these poor men somebody will say they did something bad when they didn't. Okay, well then there'll be an investigation, you know. And it will find that we just want it to be an investigation that isn't only you looking at the facts and refusing to tell us what they were, and we have to take your word for it. You know, so it's sort of the arguments that you would expect, but not, I think, arguments that are legitimate. Okay, so and if you want the names of legislators specifically, I am looking at a spreadsheet now.
Yeah, let's go. We'll tag them.
Yeah, I can just tell you the Baltimore City legislators who are not signed on to these policing demands. And in addition to repeal of the LEOBOR and reform of the Maryland Public Information Act in the ways I just described, it also includes the Counselors Not Cops Act for schools, a statewide use of force policy, and local control of the Baltimore Police Department. So the Baltimore City legislators who have not signed on to that, according to this ACLU list, are Luke Clippinger, which is pretty huge because he is the chair of the House Judiciary Committee. Adrienne Jones, and that's the Speaker of the whole House. And she has her own versions of these bills out, actually, on the House side, which are problematic. Her version of the LEOBOR repeal keeps the police-dominated trial boards. So she's a really important person to be contacting right now. Yeah, Benjamin Brooks, John Carden, Michelle Guyton, Dana Stein, Pat Young. This is Baltimore City and County. Kurt Anderson, who I mentioned, Dela Attar, Chanel Branch, Talmadge Branch, Tony Bridges, Frank Conway, Nick. Oh, this is outdated because it still says Nick Mosby on it. He's the city council president now. But regardless, Sandy Rosenberg and Keith Haynes were the others. So it's actually quite a long list. And the point there, I think, is wherever you are in the city, you know, reach out to your delegate or state senator and say, I need to know your position on this. Are you willing to say, I am not just for repealing the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights, but doing it without any anti-accountability amendments pushed by like the pro-police lobby. And on the state Senate side, Charles Sidnor, who represents part of West and Southwest Baltimore, is on the Judicial Proceedings Committee. And again, he's signed on to the 5 demands writ large, but that doesn't mean that he's necessarily going to hold firm on that no, the way it was written version. So he's in District 44, I believe. Shelley Laskins-Hedelman in the county. District 11 is another Baltimore person. And I'm trying not to make this hard Baltimore City County distinction because I know that like we live outside of those lines. But yeah, Senate President Bill Ferguson, he's in Southeast Baltimore, and he could sway this one way or another just by saying this is what we're doing. And he is not committed to full repeal of LEOBOR without, again, any of these problematic watered down changes to it. But yeah, all of your delegates and senators should be hearing from you about this right now.
So Maryland Congress.
People are paying attention. Sorry.
No worries. Maryland Congress is opening up the floor for debate on this issue in about 15 minutes. Is it likely to be a done deal by the end of the night? Or what can citizens still do around advocating for these issues, you know, after this debate, this vote takes place tonight?
Yeah, nothing is guaranteed. And I'm hearing from advocates who are really following the hearings that have already happened, because again, they started debating this on Friday, and it might have been voted on then and said it was, so they went into recess and they came back, and now they're about to start talking about it again. They might vote on it tonight. And that's the ask, actually, is we like these bills, the advocates like these bills as they are written. There was extensive, you know, work behind the scenes, aside from, again, this work of years from so many different organizations. This whole fall, you know, people have been working on it very carefully with Senator Carter, and we have what we need, you know, so vote it out tonight, pass it. Will that happen? We don't know. Or will it drag on and more of these problematic amendments get proposed and pile on top of it? But either way, it won't be a done deal either at this stage. Once it comes out of Judicial Proceedings Committee, if it does, in whatever form it does, that doesn't have to be the end of the story. They have the power to send it back and continue to work on it.
So procedurally, when might we expect a conclusion? Is there any time frame, or is that indeterminate?
They don't have to make a decision, basically. They don't have to vote it out of committee. They might have to vote now that they've started, but it does not have to leave committee. And the chair has pretty complete control over that. So that's another really important person to talk to. Will Smith is the name of the Senate Judicial Proceedings chair. He's not a Baltimore legislator, but when it comes to these committee chairs, it is much more sort of legitimate. Same with the House Speaker and the Senate President, for anybody to reach out to them, because they're making decisions that affect everybody statewide. They're not just representing themselves at that point. They've been given this position of trust. And it's on him.
So if LEOBOR is repealed in letter and in spirit, what's next for Baltimore for Border Justice?
Well, the thing that we've been advocating for quite a while now is local control of the Baltimore Police Department. And that's in a really interesting place. It's so different from where things were last year when we were doing advocacy around it. Mayor Scott has put forth a version of a bill for local control, then had representatives in the General Assembly sort of put it in, but it's at the request of the administration, which is something that like governors and mayors do from time to time. But what it does is it doesn't just straight say, hey, Baltimore City, the BPD is no longer a state agency, it's now a city agency. It creates an advisory board to study the issue for a year and a half. Actually, the way it's written, it gives it way more time than advocates want, and they're going to scale it back, make it happen a little faster, is what we're hearing. But there's going to be a ballot initiative to the voters then, and the city voters will have to sign off on getting back control of our police department. So that's going to be a really interesting one to follow. We have focused a lot on police terror, as you said, but our little aid and advocacy organization was really founded around injustice at the border. And there's a lot of that happening right now. So we're also following bills to prohibit local police collaboration with ICE. That's the Maryland Trust Act. The Dignity Not Detention Act to ban for-profit immigrant detention centers in Maryland, which are just a really noxious thing that's been proposed for the Baltimore region. And the Driver Privacy Act, so that ICE can't just rifle through MVA records and arrest people based on that, which is something that happens here in Maryland now. So we're addressing these things locally, but we're also taking a really close look at the situation on the border, where they're opening up these sort of tent cities for unaccompanied migrant children again. And advocates are saying, hey, this doesn't need to go down like this. There are sponsor families who can take these kids. They don't need to be months in these facilities. And, we started this group when news was coming out about hundreds of young children and babies being kept at this facility in Clint, Texas. And these detention centers they're doing now, they're more spacious, they're more clean, but there should not be detention of children seeking refuge from death. If thousands of American children and infants were fleeing for their lives into Canada, I would like to think, and there were families, that were willing to host them, I would like to think the Canadian government wouldn't make them stay for months, in camps. That they could just be humane about it. And at the same time, ICE is deporting Haitian children and infants back to their country. completely unaccompanied, which is just an incredibly cruel thing to do. So there's a lot of work to be done about borders in every sense. So that's what we're going to keep looking at and working on. Right now, the state session is pretty all-consuming, you know, because we need to break down these racial and class and neighborhood borders here at home, and these blocks to police accountability will keep us from ever being able to do that. So that's our focus at the moment. But you know, we really want to get more inputs from the communities and partners, you know, that we work with. You know, Justice for Tyrone West, and to get the officers who killed him off the street. Jorge Brennan, Jorge Ruiz is one where the coalition has created a video sort of showing, I think it's 6 different documented cases in Baltimore City where this man has brutalized and profiled different people. So we want justice specifically for specific cops, you know, who've killed people and who are still on the streets. And the Johns Hopkins private police force bill is another really big one for us. There is a bill to not just repeal authorization for that, because they had gotten the bill passed saying they could have a private university police. They put it on hold, you know, for a couple of years, waiting for the heat to die down after the protests this summer. But there's a bill in now to not just repeal their authorization for that, but ban private university police, period. You know, like this is not a good thing, period. And it was a Morgan State University officer who
Killed Tyrone West.
Tyrone West. Yeah, so that's a piece of local accountability and justice as well. But yeah, we that's going to be a big fight. You know, again, contact your legislators, but I don't think that that's going to pass this year because there's not the momentum about it. The bill came up really fast, and there's a lot of confusion about it. And the advocates are out there, but we could do a stronger job, and we need to, because our representatives who voted for this in the first place, they're committed to that now. They're like, well, I was the one who said that they should have it, so to turn back around and say they shouldn't have it, they need a lot more pressure. And so we have this window now to say, no, this incredibly wealthy institution with a history of racism that's
responsible for the Tuskegee experiments.
Yeah.
Living memory, as just an example.
Yes. And that has their current security officers have brutalized people that I know, and have treated the student protesters last year incredibly poorly. The university as a system as a whole sort of showed that it couldn't be trusted with a police force at this time, that 70% plus of their student body was saying, we don't want a police force for Hopkins. And hundreds of staff have signed on at this point, and thousands of alumni and grad students and community members have signed this petition to say, we don't, and dozens of organizations, you know, again, we go on and on, but nobody wants this except the administrators of Hopkins and like some community association presidents in wealthier parts of the districts, you know, around the footprint, and which they won't even define what the footprint is. So we feel really strongly, again, just trying to connect back to our thing and how this is all connected. This is a way to create borders between the Hopkins bubble and everybody else, and say, once you enter the zone, look out, you're going to be under extra scrutiny. And we Hopkins police, who are here to keep you out, we have badges and guns now, but we don't answer, you know, to the mayor and city council. We answer to JHE President Ron Daniels. So here we are trying to get police accountability and transparency, and they're trying to set up parallel systems that will not be accountable in the same way. So that's completely unacceptable. I had to talk around to come around to it for a second because there's so much. But locally, I feel like, yeah, stopping the Hopkins private police force is going to be a really big thing in the coming year.
the tension between Hopkins and the folks who actually live in the neighborhoods around Hopkins is such a microcosm of the relationships between impoverished people, largely people of color, and the, institutions which are granted, in Chomsky's words, a monopoly on the state authorized use of violence. And it's so crucial to shine a light on what that relationship is between Hopkins and the folks who live there, both in terms of the way that their security already affects people's, safety in their own neighborhood, and then also the way that Hopkins is buying up property in that area that used to be affordable housing, is turning it into either an extension of the campus or inaffordable housing that's only accessible to wealthy folks who go to Hopkins, work at Hopkins, and then is taking those housing opportunities away from people already in the area. It's a old and contentious relationship that brings to light so many deeper issues about race and power in Baltimore City.
Absolutely, absolutely. You really said it. And when you said specifically the relationship, between neighbors and Hopkins, and the relationship has been so often, we don't want you to be our neighbors anymore. We're taking it and just displacing people.
So thank you so much for your time today, Abby. And as we part ways right now, I want to ask you how folks can follow these issues, or if there are any dates relating to grassroots work around these issues, or key moments in the Maryland legislature that we should be aware of.
Yeah, so there's a couple of bills that I mentioned that still have hearings coming up, and these are really important opportunities to submit testimony, either verbally or written. What's happening tonight with LEOBOR repeal and Maryland Information Act reform is a working session, and so we can watch it. And it is fascinating to watch these proceedings, and does let you know when it's an important time to really be pushing your legislators. But we can't give any direct input other than contacting them. The hearings are the public input time. So let me see here. The Maryland Trust Act, which would say police can't act as henchmen for ICE anymore, pretty big deal. That's going to have a hearing in the House Judiciary Committee on Wednesday, March 3rd, so 2 weeks from now. And testimony is due 48 hours before. So you go onto the Maryland General Assembly website, you log into this My MGA account, and then you can upload written testimony as a PDF, or you can sign up to give verbal testimony. And up to 50 people can give, they might have even increased it, can give public testimony at these hearings. So yeah, Monday, March 1st on that, and on the Dignity Not Detention Act. They're gonna hear both of those at the same time. That's the one to end for-profit immigration prison in Maryland. So again, Monday, March 1st, you can submit testimony and say, hey, as an individual, on behalf of my church or my community group or my advocacy organization, or whatever. But definitely, even if you're just writing as an individual, say, I live in XYZ district, and I need you to know I'm a really strong supporter of this bill. This is not okay for Maryland to be complicit in sending people into the clutches of this out of control, sinister
Punitive organization.
Hmm?
It's a punitive organization.
Yes. Yeah. So I could go on all day. But yeah, follow Baltimore for Border Justice on social media. We'll keep sharing important dates and information as we have it. Follow the Campaign for Justice, Safety, and Jobs. They're a local coalition of advocacy organizations. They've got a monthly meeting open to the public where you can hear more about, how everybody's strategizing collectively. Pay attention to CASA, ACLU, Jews United for Justice. They're all putting up excellent updates about where everything stands. So that's just stay on it, contact your legislators. Yeah, and if anybody wants more detailed information to talk strategy, how their group could get involved, I'd be more than happy to talk to them. So again, you can contact us on Facebook. You can email us at be4borderjustice@gmail.com. But we'll also get you connected in as best we can.
Thanks so much for your time tonight, Abby.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, Serafina. Have a good one.
Mm-hmm. You too.